Welcome to The Favorites, the podcast presented by Bet365. We are part of the Volume Podcast Network. I am Chad Millman of the Action Network. We are live from our Tommy John home studios. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my companion, my compadre, my BFF professional bettor, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon.
Chad, what's going on, brother?
Listen, I feel like I'm more of a interested student in the glorious, colorful, exciting past that is betting and the sports betting world. It's how I got into it, right? Like I was never better first, writer second. I was writer first who loved the psychology. I love the history. I love the story of the mob. I love sort of the characters who populate the world of sports betting. And so, we had Mitchell had come up with this great idea a few weeks ago where he did some great old gambling stories, and some of which he stole from an excellent book called Roll the Bones. And today we are joined by the author of Roll the Bones, a longtime professor at UNLV, University, Nevada, Las Vegas, the nation's preeminent gambling historian. Roll the Bones, we know, is Matt's favorite book. So imagine Matt's delight when we found out our author and our guest has a brand new book that just came out in January called Something for Your Money, The History of Las Vegas Casinos, available now wherever books are sold. He's someone I've known for years. He was a regular and patient source when I would head out to Vegas during my ESPN days and was out there for a variety of stories. Welcome to the show, Dave Schwartz.
Thanks for having me, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Listen, your book has thrown Matt Mitchell for a loop. He can't believe this book exists. He can't believe it tells every story that he's been dying to know for years. Can you please, for Matt Mitchell's sake and for the sake of our listeners, who are all avid, interested parties in betting, how did you end up doing this?
Well, I grew up in Atlantic City, New Jersey, just around the time that they legalized gambling. So one of my earliest memories was them blowing up the old hotels and building casinos. So as a kid, I was really curious, like, why do people gamble in casinos? Why are they blowing up all the old hotels and stuff like that? So when I went to grad school, I decided to write a dissertation on that. And that started me on the road to studying the history of gambling and casinos.
And so you wrote Roll the Bones. You wrote Something for Your Money, which just came out. Both of them are packed with deliciously colorful stories about not just sort of the recent history of betting, but the entire history of betting. Gambling is so intertwined with the history of America, right? From lotteries being how we paid for the American Revolution. Lotteries were how Harvard and Yale were funded and founded. This is, it is core to the American experience. All that said, what were your favorite stories when researching these books?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. One fun story, it just shows how far we've come politically and in a lot of ways. So in the 1828 election, which was a rematch of Andrew Jackson against John Quincy Adams, one of the scandals was that John Quincy Adams allegedly had bought a billiards table for the White House. And so there was an outrage that how dare he buy gambling equipment with public money? Ironic because Andrew Jackson was a huge degenerate gambler, just like absolutely would love to bet on horses, just totally sick gambler. So it's kind of funny that they accuse the New England John Quincy Adams, the intellectual, of being a gambler. They tried to do some spin. And these days, again, the president or the candidate wouldn't speak for themselves. They would have people speak for them. So they tried to do some spin and said, well, he didn't really buy it. He doesn't gamble. He just has it so that the visiting aristocrats have something to do. And like, oh, now you're an aristocrat. Now you're better than us. So trying to make it better made it worse. And it was one of those things, probably public frustration over the banking system. All those issues were the things that probably really got Jackson in the White House. But, this was a little part of it. So I think that's fascinating that gambling had a role in this very pivotal election, 1828.
But when you were thinking about this as a field of study, or thinking about what your first book was going to be, next book was going to be, how you're teaching gambling as a professor, how do you frame the idea of risk and gambling into the evolution of the country that we see today?
Well, it really is an essential part. And if you look at it, America, United States, it really is a place of second chances, and that means that things didn't go well your first chance. So there is this idea that the United States is just tolerant of risk, and that's how things happen. And sometimes it goes really well, sometimes it doesn't go so great, but there's always another shot.
Matters, Simon. I don't want to monopolize if one of you want to jump in. I know, Matt, you've got a lot of questions.
I'll let Matt fly.
Dave, one of my favorite anecdotes from Roll the Bones is about William Penn. Is it true that the land that would become the state of Pennsylvania was potentially the repayment of a royal debt?
Yeah, that is the story. Obviously, I wasn't there, so when he signed that marker, but William Penn was a Quaker leader. Anybody from Philly, I went to school in Philly, so the statue of Billy Penn. So he was a Quaker. Quakers were not the most popular group in England at the time. And somehow he got this grant for Pennsylvania, which is a really lucrative part of what would become the colonies and later the US. And the story was Sir William Penn, the Quaker's father, was a gambling buddy of King Charles II. And when Sir William Penn died, Charles II owed him a lot of money. And basically on his deathbed said, just take care of my son and we're good. And supposedly that's where it came from. So that's how the Quakers ended up with Pennsylvania. And that's how we get to the Eagles, I guess.
And that's the most remarkable thing about this book. That's like 55 words in this book. I'm like, oh yeah, and by the way, there's a pretty good chance the state of Pennsylvania was the settlement of a gambling debt. And then you just move on to 700 other fascinating things. It really is a remarkable piece of literature.
Do we have any idea what Charles II and William Penn were gambling?
Yeah, probably Faro, Faro. That was the popular game back then. So probably Faro, but it could also have been a number of card games, not poker because that wasn't invented yet, but there are a number of earlier bidding card games that would eventually kind of evolve into poker.
And the king had a marker? Like, how does
Yeah, well, not literally. That's just my gambling. Again, like having worked in the casino industry, you kind of use the terminology. Basically, yeah, it's a gambling debt, not legally collectible, but morally collectible. Right. And that's the thing about gamblers, that they rather pay the gambling debt to prove that they're good for it than not. So yeah, Charles II was good for it in the end, and Pennsylvania is the proof.
Well, Simon, as a Philly adjacent native, this is in your territory. It is part of your history now. To know that you are doing the right thing in your community by gambling as much as you possibly can.
And it's crazy to think everything gets birthed from the Penn name. Penn Medicine. I mean, obviously, like you just talked about, our Capitol building has William Penn standing on the top of it. And it's pretty insane to think, not that Philadelphia is just known for betting, but at its core, I mean, I can't tell you how many street bookies I knew, Chad, growing up, where every neighborhood, every block has a different guy. And it's starting to make more sense when you really think about the state and how it was founded and the people that lived there. And because that was probably, I wouldn't say common knowledge right back then, but people must have known. I mean, everyone just talks. Everyone's at everyone's business. This is before, obviously, newspapers and everything like that. I mean, the word must have spread around town about how Pennsylvania got birthed. Am I assuming that right?
Oh yeah, and I think people knew how big, Charles II was into a lot of that. He spent a lot of time in exile in France. The
Right.
French then were the notorious gamblers, so kind of picked up that habit. And it's kind of interesting too, when you look at people who don't like gambling, which there are people, for a while in England, they said, well, this isn't a genuine English hobby, it's a French perversion that came into England. So it's kind of funny how that is spun, and we see that happen throughout history.
Well, look, you must have seen this through many stages in your research, whether it was, England in the 1600s to sports betting and that being the third rail of gambling. I remember sitting with you in the UNLV library, and I think in the building where your department is, and we were talking about Delaware and New Jersey and how Delaware at the time had legalized, New Jersey had just filed suit to get passed by the Professional Amateur Sports Protection Act overturned. And you use the phrase sports betting is the third rail of all the betting types: lottery, legal poker, legal casinos, Native American casinos, all of that. What do you think finally turned, in your point of view, from your very deep knowledge and base of perspective? What do you think finally turned for sports betting?
Well, it's interesting because if you look back in the 1950s, when people in the government were researching, well, what is gambling and how's it happening? It was mostly illegal. And I remember, I think it might have been something that came out of New York City or somewhere, but this government study said, the numbers, which was the illegal lotteries and policy, like that's the worst. It's the most exploitative. Sports betting, at least better, has a chance, but this is just the worst. And 10 years later, what did states legalize? Lotteries. And at the time, there's a lot of debate. Well, if we were to legalize sports betting, what happens if the bettors get lucky? Now we owe money. So governments didn't want to do it because they didn't want to take on that liability. What happened was the private casino companies, basically, because they have the casino itself to offset that, and they can use the sports betting to draw people in. In the old model and the new model, it's just another revenue source because it's online. Basically, once they got behind it, things shifted. But before that, states weren't really eager to legalize it because, I mean, just imagine what it would be like if state of New Jersey or Pennsylvania or anyone was running, running a sports book. It would be very different.
Well, wait a second. I had no idea that was the case. My understanding, and I didn't do any research on this, I just
Yeah.
sort of assumed it,
Yeah.
was that sports betting never really got traction because of moral issues. And you're saying it had nothing to do with it. It was really about the fear that they would all of a sudden be on the hook for customer friendly outcomes, as they call them today, and have to pay out. And all of a sudden, instead of having a surplus, they've got a debt.
Yeah, well, I think that, and again, I'm not in their mind, so I wasn't there back then. I don't know what they did, but if we look at it, look at the different forms of gambling. Most states legalize lotteries first, highest margin. Then went into casinos. They can tax it, they can make decent money. Sports betting was last because that has the narrowest margin. And again, you don't have that, it's not as dependable. So when they're doing it for budgetary reasons, like, okay, we're going to generate with a lottery, we can generate this much money a year to fund the schools. Sports betting, not that stable. So I don't think there's a lot of people rushing to legalize it back then.
It's always about the money. It's never about the morals, Dave. It's always about the money. I have one more question, Matt, but I'm going to let you jump in a sec. But, in your book, you wrote a little bit about the Kefauver hearings. And for those who don't know, I'll just say it quickly so I can set up the question. In the early 1950s, Estes Kefauver, who was a senator from Tennessee, very ambitious guy, there was a lot of consternation within communities, especially big cities, about the influence of organized crime. And so he set up this 2 years of investigations going city to city on a tour where he had subpoenaed the organized crime bosses, and they were being forced to testify about their business and everything that was going on. To me, one of the biggest things that came out of it was the realization by the public that sports betting was the biggest revenue driver for organized crime. And to me, Dave, I don't know if you have studied and seen differently, that felt like a death blow for sports betting that felt like a fun thing people did in the community to being sort of a nefarious, dangerous thing. And it changed that business's trajectory.
Yeah, because if you look at the history of illegal gambling, right? Back in the 20s, when we know organized crime was doing a lot of stuff, you would see, if you go back in the newspaper archives, we'll talk about local rackets boss. So there was like the Brooklyn rackets and the waterfront rackets and the Newark rackets and the Philly rackets. It was all local. Okay. What happens in 1950 and 51, the Kefauver is, okay, he needs an issue. He wants to be president. He needs an issue. Kind of went into antitrust stuff, but that didn't excite people. McCarthy had already taken anti-communism, so that's gone. Well, what about gambling? Well, wait. The local gambling you're doing with your bookie, that's actually part of this national or even international crime syndicate. So it's a national issue. So Congress has jurisdiction because it crosses state lines. And that's where it really shifted. And that's where you had the idea of the mafia as a national organization or even international organization. Before that, it was all local, and again, it's kind of fun to go back in the archives and see when they start using that language. So yeah, it did change the narrative, because originally people said, well, yeah, I'm just putting down a $2 bet. And there's a book in the archives called A $2 Bet Means Murder. Wow. And it's trying to tell people, yeah, your harmless sports betting is actually funding organized crime. And that did shift the narrative. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, there's nothing like a complete and total extraction from your $2 bet to that being the reason why the person down the street is getting knocked off.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I've been killed by a small bet before. It's done me that much harm. So that makes sense.
As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365, and now new Bet365 customers get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5. Sign up using promo code Favorites, deposit $10. Place a bet for $5 to get $150 in bonus bets. Those bonus bets can be used on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Also, reminder, folks, officially RSVP for our free Favorites live show event in Chicago. Elite 8 March Madness game Saturday, March 29th. We're going to Joe's Bar on Weed Street, more popularly known as Joe's on Weed. Free event, free drinks, free live show. Me, Simon, some other guests. RSVP to reserve your spot. Follow the link in this episode's description or just Google Favorites Podcast Event Chicago and the RSVP site pop right up. RSVP, free drinks, free fun. Me and Simon hanging out with all of you.
One of my kind of favorite themes of of both your books, but there's so much gambling embroiled in parts of American history and American culture, and really international world history going back hundreds of years. But one of my favorite anecdotes was that in the middle of the 19th century, the first major regulatory act in congressional history, so Congress had been around for like, 80 years, related to boiler construction and steamboat licensing. Could you explain why that was related to gambling?
Okay, so we all know this is in the golden age of steamboats, all that fun stuff. Also, people use steamboats. They became gambling tools. People both gambled on them, playing all kinds of games, especially poker, but also people would bet which steamboat was going to get there first. The captains were cut in on it, so they would have an incentive. And they found that captains and the crew would push the steamship so hard that boilers exploded. And they said, this is too much risk. We've got to cut back in this. So it is amazing how something like that, and it also shows how universal that gambling gene is, where like literally the vessel you're riding on with the high pressure steam that is deadly, that has killed people before, you're still going to overload it just to get that edge. That is wild.
It's crazy that you report that in 1 year, 500 people died from this, and that
Yeah.
Congress is like, holy shit, guys. You keep blowing up your own passengers because you can't stop racing your steamboats. We are going to make our first ever regulatory action. It's hilarious. And obviously, you know a tremendous amount about Las Vegas and its history, and we'll dive into that shortly.
Yeah.
But those steamboats obviously related to the big business of New Orleans. Could
Yeah.
you explain briefly, kind of how important New Orleans was to the development of American gambling pre-Las Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, New Orleans was huge. It was really America's first gambling capital, without a doubt. You had the French, you had the Spanish, you had Native Americans, you had African cultures coming in there. So you also had a lot of people, a lot of money. It was a thriving port. So it really is where if people in America wanted to gamble, most gambling was happening there. They experimented with legal gambling houses really early on in the 19th century. The games of poker and craps were both born in New Orleans or near New Orleans. So really, New Orleans in the 19th century was the capital of gambling in America, without a doubt.
Incredible.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off that. I've thought a lot about this, and gambling to me, it's a really important part of my life. And you seem like someone that knows all of it. I mean, every little detail, every story. And a story I love that I read a long time ago is about Native Americans didn't have a word for lie, but they did have a word for bet. And I always thought that's such a human thing. Like at our core, I mean, think of the earliest man would say to his buddy, I bet you I can race you home and beat you in a race, or I can kill that animal before you can kill it. Like a little bet like that. What is your discovery of the earliest bets ever written or made in human history?
Well, it goes back really far. I've got another layer of this, so in the basically, for a lot of human history, people weren't living in settlements. The first settlements, we find evidence of gambling, primitive dice, things like that. And kind of the funny thing is, so like if we would say, and I'm not saying this is the absolute year, but if we say the earliest dice were 10,000 years old, the earliest cheating dice, crooked dice, are like 9,999 years old. So cheating was also part of it, a long ways away. And it's kind of funny, like one of the more poignant stories is when Mount Vesuvius erupted and Pompeii was engulfed in ash, in the taverns. There was this one thing where it was a gambling table and they had the guy's debts were like just scratched up on the wall. And I'm just thinking, like, suddenly there's all the ash and the lava coming down, and this guy's last thing is like, oh man, I'm down. And then just
He's like,
boom.
I'm great. I'm off the hook. Phew.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the guy who won is like, are you freaking kidding me? I finally hit a streak and now we're all going under. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Really bad beat. Volcanic bad beat for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Volcanic. So yeah, that can't get worse than that. Can't get worse than that.
Oh, Matt Mitchell, that was good.
One thing I wanted to also point out from your book is you have this recurring theme, which I really enjoyed, kind of to Simon's point of you go back to the earliest bets made in humankind, but all the way up to the present day, you keep describing societies that are getting more and more advanced. Gambling exists because people are congregating. Then gambling is frowned upon. Then it is outlawed. And then it is found to be totally irrepressible. And then it is eventually tolerated or regulated, but that it happens in every corner of the world over and over and over again for thousands of years. So looking back at the history of gambling kind of overall, and maybe Las Vegas specifically, our audience is mostly sports bettors. Like, what are the lessons that our audience can take away?
Well, it's basically, I mean, there's a couple of them. First of all, people have always gambled. I mean, obviously not everybody, but a lot of people have always gambled, but things do go in cycles. And there's no reason to think that people are going to keep on betting the way they're betting right now. Because if we look back, just looking at casinos in Vegas in the 60s, and we're just going to go back 60 years, which is not that much time historically, but like 60s, they're mostly playing craps. Blackjack is just starting to get big because skill play is just starting to get popular, but it's still mostly craps. There's maybe a couple dozen slot machines. It's not that big a deal. And the casinos are a lot smaller. Go to the 90s, giant air-conditioned slot machine houses, just total slot machines. But the slot machines look really different than they are today. They're mostly steppers, a couple of video machines, but mostly steppers. Versus today, less focus in the gambling, more focus in everything else. You've got electronic table games. You've got all kinds of things evolving, and that's, and think about how sports betting has changed too with the advent of technology. And now you don't have to go to the bookie. The bookie's in your phone. So there's just a lot of that going on. And I think my other lesson is, they say the house always wins. Usually the house does, but when it doesn't, this might be kind of ominous for sports betting. When the house doesn't win, the house tends to change the rules.
Mhm.
So if
Oh,
people
that's
find an exploit, they will change the rules to prevent that because the house has to win, otherwise they don't stay in business.
oh for sure. That's another recurring theme throughout history.
Well, look, that's
Yeah.
also why the states didn't want to be in that business, right? They worried that they all of a sudden would have a season where they owe money instead of are taking in money. And what do you do with, you know, that hole in the budget? Sports betting specifically, why do you think, or I guess from your point of view, you said it'll change. How is it different than what you thought it would be when it was legalized, even in these past, say, 7 years?
Well, it's really interesting because if you look at the history of sports betting in Nevada, traditionally it was maybe, and I'm saying from the 80s onward, when you had the advent of casinos being in sports betting, it was maybe 1% of total Nevada gaming revenue, maybe 1%. Then in the early 2010s, we get up to 2% and kind of into 3%. So it really is something in Nevada, it really is an amenity to bring people in. And the whole idea that they had is, I don't want my hot blackjack player leaving to go someplace else to place a bet. So I'm going to have this here, even if it doesn't make money. And, every slot manager in the world is saying, if I had that space that the sports book has or the poker room has, I could make the revenue they make in a year, I could make in a month, and like true. But then they're going to leave to go bet in someplace else, and they're going to gamble there. So they really did do it as an amenity. What we've seen, in the past 10 years or even less is the emergence of sports betting as a revenue source on its own through online and mobile, which is something we have not seen in Nevada before. So that's totally different. And it did, way back in 2010, when I was trying to extrapolate, well, how big of a market is it? Like, well, if it's 2%, it'll be this. And it turned out to be a lot bigger than that because behaviors changed. So that's just proof that it happens.
Yeah, I remember when I first started going out to Vegas and I was working on the odds, and I would get the numbers from the Nevada Gaming Control Board of the total handle and then the hold for these sports books. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, late 90s, early 2000s, it would be like 6 million a year in total revenue for every sports book in the state of Nevada. I'm like, why the fuck am I writing this book? Because this thing doesn't matter at all. Like, we thought it was a big deal, and it means nothing within the overall scheme of what really is important in the state of Nevada. But it has always, sports betting, since really the state of Nevada legalized it in the 70s, I think, has had this outsized impact on the rest of the industry in terms of not its importance, but a little bit of its glamour. Would you say that?
Yeah. And obviously there was a lot more illegal betting going on back then, which I don't think we even, for a while, the FBI estimated it. Then at some point they just kind of gave up. I learned that when I was researching another book, Cutting the Wire, which was about online gaming, gambling prohibition. So it's kind of interesting to see how they eventually said, we don't know how much illegal gambling there is, illegal sports betting there is going on, but we know it's big. So that's kind of the that's kind of where that is. But Nevada did, originally, yeah, they did view it as an amenity, but now it's becoming a revenue source in its own right.
Simon, listeners are uncomfortable in their daily lives. They lack the confidence to achieve greatness. What, they ask us, can they do? How can they transform their lives for the betters? How can they transform their lives for the better? What tools do they lack? The good news is that everything you need is just a click away. One click to TommyJohn.com/favorites to transport you to a world of comfort, confidence, and transformative change. That's because our beloved sponsor, Tommy John, offers flexible, breathable, high performance comfort on top quality underwear and casual essentials, delivering the confidence you need. Unleash your fullest potential. And with a special sale for our listeners, ascending to a higher plane of existence just got even easier. Simon, why will you be wearing more Tommy John in 2025?
Because comfort is king, Chad.
Right now, you can shop TommyJohn.com/favorites and get 25% off your first order. Save 25% at TommyJohn.com/favorites. That's TommyJohn.com/favorites. Want to make extra money daily from your sports betting? Simon knows I'm always trying to find ways to make sports betting. Sorry. 3, 2. Want to make extra money daily from your sports betting? Simon knows I'm always trying to find ways to take sports betting to the next level. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Edge Boost, the financial platform that pays you cash back to wager. Edge Boost is an online bank account that pays you for every deposit. With the Edge Boost Visa debit card, you receive up to 0.5% cash back on all your sportsbook, daily fantasy site, and casino transactions. That's free money back in your pocket for doing what you're already doing. It's a no-brainer. Plus, your Edge Boost debit card starts with a $250,000 daily limit and will never be declined for gambling activity. They've got built-in tools to help you stay responsible, and there are absolutely no hidden fees or minimum required balances. Stop leaving money on the table. Visit edgeboost.bet to sign up. If you use promo code favorites and deposit $25, you'll receive a $25 deposit match plus tier 2 status for faster bank deposits and more cash back. That's edgeboost.bet, promo code favorites.
This is a sloppily worded question, so apologies. But like, you could describe let's say 1,000 years of betting activity across the whole world, right?
Yeah.
All of them, all of the betting activity in every form always involved other human parties and almost always leaving your home. And now, only in the last, like, whatever, decade, you no longer need both of those things. How enormous of a change is that from a cultural standpoint to like what betting is and how intrinsically human the activity is?
It's a big change, and it's one that's probably about 500 or 600 years in the making, to be a little dramatic there. So if we think back, to the dawn of gambling, as we were saying, like, yeah, can I throw this, rock farther than you? Can I catch this animal for you? That sort of thing. Like Simon was saying, yeah, that is personal. Oh, my horse is faster than your horse. All right, well, I don't know, but my buddy's horse is faster than your buddy's horse. Okay, now we're doing that. My alma mater can beat your alma mater in football. Okay, my favorite team can beat your team. It was very personal. You have this shift to mercantile gambling to commercial gambling that really gets underway more in the Renaissance and that period, the Reformation, as you have the rise of sort of capitalism and fun things like that. And it intensifies in America with the invention of the slot machine, where, like, if you think about what we did in America, we took gambling and we invented a machine that can gamble more efficiently, which is such an American thing. And that's late 19th century, 1899. This is what they were doing. And this is what Americans are doing. Like, oh, railroad, we'll build a bigger railroad. Telegraph, yeah, all across the country. Gambling, yeah, here's a machine that'll do that for you. So, and looking at betting, invention of the telegraph. Hey, now we can find out what's happening at racetracks all around the country. We can bet on them here. And that was really the first remote betting. And I argue that was the first remote entertainment, where people would actually be hearing them narrate like what's happening in the race, and they're very excited. And people were freaked out then because they're like, oh my God, why are they jumping and yelling and screaming and stuff? And they're not even at the track.
I would say it's probably the intrinsic power of the spoken word, Chad.
Yeah.
Timeless. It's timeless and evocative. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And they had no concept of remote entertainment like today, where we'll watch the game and get all excited, even though we're not in the stadium. They had no concept. That was how that was born. So it is really interesting. And every technological advancement people are betting. Telephones, people are using telephones to bet. Internet, people are using the internet to bet. Mobile, people are using mobile now. And I don't see any reason why that wouldn't continue.
So which came first? This is a chicken and the egg. Is
Yeah.
it gambling as a point of pride or gambling for the sake of gambling? And I think there's
Yeah.
a nuanced difference there, but before technology, gambling for the sake of pride, because it had to be more in person and a little bit more about competition versus gambling that is at scale and is about gambling for gambling's sake.
Yeah, I mean, think about the difference between poker and slot machines. Poker, and I know everybody gets bad beats and stuff like that, but it comes down to I'm better than you and I'm taking your money because of skill. Even though, yeah, I mean, there are bad beats and stuff like that. And, whereas slot machines is just, hey, I'm putting my money up and whatever happens, happens. It's out of my hands. So that's that different, people who just want that rush of gambling versus people who want to gamble to show their skill. That is the difference right there. And they always had a little bit of them. Probably the skill dominated more early on, but since we've gone to more totally random games like slots, a little bit more of the pure gambling.
That's why I love gambling though. Like slots now, there's an edge. Like I know guys who have quit sports betting on what I do, and they literally live in books or outside sports books by the slot machines, and they just watch people on machines, and they know timing wise that this machine's hot. Like this machine's ready to pop. Like they just watch someone play for hours, and they'll wait and jump on their machine, which is just, to me, it's like crazy how people just find an edge in every little thing like you talked about. And go back 10,000 years, those fake dice. Pros, everybody, they're always gonna be finding an edge. They might call that cheating. To me, that's a professional. That's someone trying to find an edge. So I love the breakdown of all these history right now. It's really interesting.
Nate Silver, not to plug another book, but talking about slots, he wrote a book that came out over the summer called On the Edge. And he had a section in there about people who, to your point, Simon, are looking to find the edges in slot machines. I've probably been to Vegas 1,000 times, no exaggeration, in my life. And I think that I've played slots 0 times. Simon, like when you go to the casinos now, do you have any urge to do anything other than walk to the book, make your bet, and get out? Or will you stay and play poker? I know you love poker. Like, will you play poker? Will you play blackjack? What is your menu?
That's the running joke to a lot of professional sports bettors is it's like basketball players want to be rappers, sports bettors want to be poker players, and vice versa. Poker players, I know some really high level poker players I've seen win mini tournaments in Vegas, especially in 2014. I mean, 2015 when I was really down in Vegas a lot, and I would see these guys win 100K and then just go bet it on like a Lakers first half and lose it. And it's like that's also why these sportsbook exist, right? They're hitting these guys who are great at one thing, but something they're not great at, and they have confidence in when they shouldn't have confidence in. So, yeah, for me, slot machines, Chad, I'm with you on that. The only time I've ever hit a slot machine is at the airport in Vegas. Like, that's the one time they'll get me. If I got 8 hours to kill and I got the itch, I'll hit the slot machines and things like that. But I'm with you. The big thing for me is blackjack. I told you, if I'm really nervous about a bet I made, I can't even watch the game in the sports book. I can't be around all the people talking, anything like that. I'll go right across the blackjack table. It can be a $20 limit. I don't even care. I'm just there to kill time while watching the game on one of the corner TVs. So that's definitely my nervous jitters. I just like to sit there, play blackjack for a couple hours while watching games sometimes.
Dave, do you gamble?
$20 limit. It's pretty high roll.
No. And having worked in a casino and having been awake at 4:30 in the morning watching people gamble kind of kills all the romance.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hey,
and living in
listen,
Vegas too.
What I'm doing at 4:30 is my business, Dave.
Yeah.
The one day the volcano's coming for me, so that's
Yeah.
more time spent.
Yeah. It's just, you see things doing surveillance. It's like, just like, well, I'm not, and part of it for me is like, I'm no smarter or luckier than these people. So it's not going to be winning. It's got to be somebody. I don't think it's going to be me.
Our audience will not be surprised that I absolutely adore gambling. I can think of the 2 casinos where I was made to move because they were shampooing the carpet while I was playing, which, as you know, like they're doing that at like
Yeah.
4
Yeah.
a.m. Christmas morning or whatever, when they're like,
Yeah.
no one will be here, which we're never going to make anybody move. I proposed at the roulette wheel of the old Barbary Coast, then Bill's Gambling Hall.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, and
I did not know that story.
she hit her numbers, and they pushed the chips out with the ring on top. I had to take the ring because I was traveling for business, and it was around Thanksgiving, from Milwaukee to Denver to my family's Thanksgiving in Baltimore to Las Vegas. So it hit every time zone, which made me want to puke my guts out. Don't travel with a diamond ring. And then, yeah, I just assumed that the Bill's Gambling Hall would be fine with it. They were like, what the fuck are you talking about? I was like, oh, right, I forgot to like clue you in on this. I had lost enough money at Bill's historically that the pit boss was like, oh, dude, no problem, no problem. And he showed the ring to the camera, placed it on the chips, and said, I'll clear this table out, and then you have to fill it. So I got my family who would come with me, and we sat down, and she lost every spin. She played 10 numbers at a time. So you're going to win about, one in every 4 spins. She lost 12 spins in a row. It was absolutely excruciating. I'm sweating through my clothes. By now, the pit boss has told every other table in the vicinity what's happening. So every time she lost, there were audible groans coming from the other tables, which she thought she was being mocked. But yeah, it was great. And that was November 2010. So still going strong. She said yes, by the way. Still going strong. Yeah, it's great.
I've
Dude,
got to put out another edition because that's the best gambling story I've heard.
Oh, I remember when I told the Bill Sportsbook, because of course she says, yes, we hug. And then I'm like, I got to go make some more bets. And I said, hey, I just got engaged. And the guy's like, sounds good. I go, no, I got engaged here. The reaction of the Bill's Gambling Hall Sportsbook employees to that I had chosen to get engaged in that casino at that time was so, I've never seen people ask more clarifying questions. Bill's Las Vegas. Bill's Las Vegas today, and they gave me the whole book of drink tickets as a thank you. So yeah, I can't say enough about those good people.
that is legendary, Matt. I don't know how we've known each other for as long as we have, and you've never told me that story.
Oh, it's I'm actually this is by total coincidence. I'm drinking from a Bill's Gambling Hall mug as we speak, which I bought that day.
You've told me every boring, long gambling story of your entire life, and you've never told me that story.
I'm just full of surprises, Chad. We
You
all
are.
contain multitudes.
Dave, you just said something that I wanted to follow up on. You worked surveillance at casinos?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Back when that was my postgraduate work. So when I was in undergrad, I worked security. After I went and got a PhD, I came back, moved back to Atlantic City and went into surveillance.
So
What
if
did
I
you
got
see?
taken out to the loading docks, were you out there with them, or you were still in the back room just in their earpiece saying, yeah, take him out the back door?
Just in the, I mean, the thing, yeah, I was thinking about this. I really like doing security because you're out there, you're just out with people, you're interacting, you're on the floor, you got all that excitement. In surveillance, you're just up in the room. And it's like sometimes it was kind of fun, kind of like Mystery Science Theater 3000, just like watching TV and like making jokes and stuff. Other times it was just, there's a lot of tedium. There's a lot of tedium just watching people doing repetitive motions again and again and again. And you kind of pick up like when someone's gambling, like they're very focused on their gambling. So if somebody's gambling and they're looking around, well, maybe I got to watch them because they shouldn't be doing that. They should be focused. I remember one time there's this guy playing slots and I'm like, he's really nervous. He's gambling. He's like really nervous. I'm like, he's rubbernecking. Okay, I'm pretty sure he's doing a sort thing with slugs. I'm like all zoomed in, like, yeah, man, I'm gonna get him. This is great. Then I assume it was his wife comes down and was like, and like that's why he was nervous because he was waiting for maybe he was going to propose. I don't know. But yeah, it's so funny. I'm like, I thought I had it. I was so excited. Like, yeah, finally got one. I got a slot scam here. Didn't have a slot scam. Mostly, I think I had just a couple of purse snatching kind of things, those kinds of things.
Did you get pretty good though at being able to tell if someone was trying to count cards or cheat at the table at all?
Now they had a count team for that, so that was kind of beyond what I did then. It was more just basically watching the money. And again, it is a lot of tedium just watching the money. Let's say there's an overage or an underage. underage is worse at a cash window, you've got to go back and watch that cashier's whole shift. And basically, they're shooting it from the top down. So you're watching it slow motion, them putting out the money, proving the chips, stacking the chips. Okay, I know it's $270, and we're $100 short. So boom, boom, boom. Oh wow, now I see a transaction where the cashier was $80 short. So now I've got to look for $80 transactions too, not just the big ones. That was like, yeah, my soul left my body. I remember I spent like 3 shifts scrutinizing this one thing, and then supervisor's like, it probably happened during tape change, because back then they had tapes. And I was like, oh God, never felt so defeated. Like
That's a lot like betting. Feels like you were in the middle of like
just like,
betting
what?
college basketball. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like, yeah, I know I'm gonna find this, and there, yeah. So that's that was quite a thing.
Dave, one of the themes of both books is the everything that is old is new again. And one of my favorite examples is in the middle of the 19th century, you have Francois Blanc, and he runs a bunch of incredibly successful casinos. He's the guy that made Monte Carlo a luxurious gambling location, right? And he's visited by Napoleon's nephew, and he's a big celebrity. They can't wait to have him. And he rolls up and bets only the table maximum for like 3 days. And he kicks the shit out of the casino. He wins an absolute fortune. And then before they can win it back, he packs his stuff and leaves very abruptly. So he's got, they could barely make the payment. He took like basically all their cash on hand. But in the all that is old is new again, Francois says, they were like, what are we going to do? He goes, here's what we're going to do. Tell every person in every contact that we have across Europe that this guy cleaned us out. We are total dopes. Tell him exactly how much he won. Tell him how easy it was for him. Let everybody know we are ripe for the picking. Come on down and beat us. Our casinos, our loosest slots in town kind of mentality. And it worked. The next year was their most profitable year on record. It feels like the sports books helping to promote the long shot parlays that hit. That like there's a universality, there's a timelessness to all these tricks. I'm sure you have a million examples.
Oh yeah, and it is just that basic psychology where people report the big wins, but nobody reports the losses. So we assume, well, everyone else is winning but me, so I'm going to win soon because that's all I hear about. And in Vegas, when somebody wins at the airport slots, that makes the local news. Like somebody wins, $50,000 in slots. It's like, well, what about all the people who didn't win today at the slots? How come that's not newsworthy? So yeah, that is a thing. And I don't think that's ever going to go away.
Yeah, people think all these things are new inventions. It's like no, they've been following a playbook that is hundreds of years old.
Yeah. All I heard from that, Matt, is that guy won a lot and the casino lost a lot. And the next year the casino made it back, which means Simon and I next year, we are freaking due.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think this kind of, the advertising obviously would have worked on me. So I can also appreciate the universality of the advertising because I definitely would have been like, all right, pack our buggies or whatever, get on the railroad. We got to hit this casino in France.
Yeah. Dave, we got to let you go. I want to thank you for coming on. Roll the Bones, which is a great book, a great reference book full of amazing anecdotes. Something for your money, another fabulous book. Congrats on the release early this year. Matt's not wrong when he tells me to say you are the preeminent Vegas casino historian. You got it all. Thanks for providing so many good stories.
Thanks. It means a lot coming from you guys too. It's really, really good to hear. So humbling and gratifying. Yeah. I'm glad, and I hope people do like the books. It's just trying to share a little bit of that excitement and some of these cool stories that have happened.
Everyone go buy the books. As a reminder, the Favorites Podcast is presented by Bet365. And now new Bet365 customers get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5. Sign up using promo code Favorites, deposit $10, place a bet for $5 to get $150 in bonus bets. Those bonus bets can be used on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Simon and I will return with our next episode of The Favorites on the Action Network YouTube page this Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern, talking free agency in the NFL with Chris Raybon. Download us from Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe, leave us 5 stars, say whatever you want. Feedback as a gift. Till next time, love you.